Thank you for joining me here at my channel. In this video that I have prepared for you, I'd like to show you a technique that I really enjoy using, which is acrylic paints but applied with palette knives. This gives a lot of variety of movements of different strokes. You can use the ends of the knife, the sides of the knife, and even the very fine edge of the knife to create fine lines. And for this project I've actually done this lovely handsome pheasant. Very kindly provided the original reference photo by a lady called Nicola Elliott, who's on the free reference for photographs site. Do have a visit if you want to have a look at some wonderful pictures. At the end of this video I will actually show you a bit of closer version of the finished pheasant, but please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you'd like to watch more of my work, and if you'd like to know more details about my techniques, and of course if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Many thanks and enjoy the video. Okay, so I know this sounds counterintuitive, but what I'm doing here is actually mixing a very pale shade of white and grey, which is Payne's grey, and I'm actually grazing over the top of the yellow that you can see in the sky. The reason I'm doing this is because I want the yellow to show through, but I don't want a lot of it. I just want a little bit of a highlight, and therefore grazing the paint across it makes it possible to see it, but also tones it down. So now what I'm going to do is actually mix up a very pale yellow again, because I'd like to fill in some of the blanks, and I'm using cadmium yellow, which is a very bright yellow, so it really only needs a tiny little bit mixed in with the titanium white. As you can see, it's better to mix it thoroughly, make sure that you've got plenty of white in there, because otherwise it's going to be just too bright again, and you're trying to tone down exactly what it is. So just double check that you've got the right sort of shade, and then you can just reapply over the top. You don't have to worry about the colour going green because you haven't used a blue shade or a blue grey, so this isn't going to be a problem. And I can start to then fill in over the top of the darker yellows, mixing in with the greys where I want to, and starting to blur those edges a little bit. And it's got, again, a lot more subtle. There we go, a little bit more white over the top to just tone that back down, and you can scrape into the paint to thin it and to spread it out even more. Don't be afraid to use the knife for actually scraping and making marks in the paint and blending on the canvas while the paint is still damp. People forget that you can actually blend on a canvas, and it makes some really interesting shades. Sometimes you might find that they're not quite what you want, but that's okay because you can go over the top again. So now I'm just going to keep on adding little bits of colour, little grazings of colour over the top of these undercolours, and I'm going to speed up this process for you, and then we can move to the next part of the painting, which is one of the reasons I wanted to show you this technique. Okay, so now you can see that the subject matter here is a pheasant sitting in the field that it's on the background of. The sky is finished, And as you can see, I've added in a lot of greens, whites, burnt siennas, all sorts of field colours to build up the sense of the grass that it's sitting in. You can't actually see the bottom half of the pheasant in the reference photo, so I'm not worrying too much about the fine detail at the bottom. And here I'm adding to this sort of bird shades with the burnt sienna, a really nice dark red, some of the Indian yellow, we've got Naples yellow deep, yellow iron oxide, all those sorts of browns shades that go into making up the pheasant. And I'm blending it with the greens that form the grasses and the base down below, so that there isn't a strong line in between, because we want it to all fade together into the sort of sense of it being sat within the landscape. Okay, so now we've got to the point where the actual bird is pretty much done. I've just got a little bit of closer detail to do with the eye afterwards. Add a little bit of a white highlight, but I will use a traditional brush for that. Now, the best part now is that I'm going to start adding little bits of detail to the black areas on the pheasant where the feathers join. And they're a very odd shape, and I'm not going to worry too much about being precise with the shape. What I want to do, like the rest of the bird, is give an impression of those shapes. So what I'm going to use is the very end of my palette knife. Now, I have one here which I'm hoping that you can see has got a really nice rounded top to it. So the beauty of that is that it's pretty much the same shape as I'm actually going to want to make on the bird. So I'm going to just literally dip the end of that palette knife into the paint, and this is Payne's grey, not black, and just get a nice covering. If there's too much, just blot it onto your canvas, onto your palette, and just work it like that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it upside down, so I'm holding it that way up, and I'm just going to apply it, and it's already given me that curved shape. So I can add as many of those shapes as I want. Obviously keep putting it into your palette, keep picking up the colour. If you get it where you don't want it, it's okay, it's still wet, you can wipe it away. And it just adds those little bits of detail without worrying. You've already done the hard work. This will just give the impression of those shapes. And you can do as many or as few as you want. They do work in roughly a line across the bird. Once you start to feel that there's nothing coming on, dip the end of your palette knife in there again, and you've got those shapes coming up. So the versatility of using a palette knife means that you can really enjoy doing different shapes without a rigid structure. and you can start to add marks to wherever you want. It might be a little bit heavy, but the beauty for that is I will just actually scrape that off a little. I will use a smaller palette knife to scrape that off. Just literally take it off. If it runs into the rest, it doesn't matter, it becomes part of the feathers, or you can just keep scraping until you're happy. And that goes with all of these shapes. If you want to change the shape, break them up a little, just use a knife and just give them a bit of a scrape. Nothing to worry about with that. And that will continue to give the impression. If I wanted to make smaller shapes, obviously I could then use this much smaller palette knife and do little bits in exactly the same way and make little bobs going up. Because we've got so much texture with the way we've built up, we can actually still graze if we want to a little bit and add. It's a little bit too heavy, so I'll again scrape that out. Use your finger. If it goes wrong, just scrape it off, scrape off your paint and go into the colour that you want that to be and just reapply over the top. Because we're working with nice damp acrylics, this is not a problem. We can do that, we can fix it. I'm the queen of fixing things, and sometimes that even adds even more nice texture where you perhaps didn't have it before. This is the beauty of acrylic. You can go over bits that you are not happy with until you are happy. You can take out, you can add in, you can enjoy the process. It all goes into the mix. There we go. A bit more of that burnt sienna mix just to take it up around there, and a little bit of yellow oxide. And again, just adds that little bit of emphasis. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about any more black on this. I think that gives enough of an impression. What I will now do is finish off adding in the grass details that I want, the eye detail that I want to make sure that you can see that very well. They have quite a large black pupil, which I will add in, and then I will just put a little bit of feather detail on one area that has quite a specific break in it, and then I will show you the final result at the end.